Last time we looked at the grade 1s, so it's about time that we're going to take a look at the best grade 2s of 2020 that were released for Cardfight Vanguard. And just like the previous list, we're going to take certain criteria in mind when building the top 10 list itself, because I want to take a look at the most impactful cards that were the strongest or performed the best, but in some case I might take certain grade 2s that might not be on everybody's mind or on everybody's list, because certain grade 2s might have a lot of impact for low tier decks or budget decks that can spike their power potential upwards quite a lot, and that would bring those grade 2s in higher caliber than your average typical grade 2s. So with that explained, let's jump straight into the list. Stand up, Vanguard! And for number 10, we're gonna get super excited and a bit extreme, because for number 10, we've got a brand new grade 2, which is Extreme Battler Do Sledge. And this grade 2 opened up a lot of interesting things for Nova Grappler. And first sight, you might think it's a very good card for the Extreme Battler engine, because it restands a lot, but this card is actually pretty good in any Nova Grappler deck across the board, because it's a grade 2, or more precisely a unit that becomes more powerful every single time it restands, which is the main gimmick of Nova Grappler. And it also combats somewhat of the biggest issue of Nova Grappler, which are low multi-attacking numbers. And this card becoming stronger and stronger with every single attack is very powerful for a deck like Nova Grappler, which makes this card very fitting for the number 10 spot on this list, and also for opening up this new top 10 list. Now for the number 9 spot, we're gonna stay a bit in theme for Nova Grappler with their multi-attacking, because for number 9 spot, we've got two multi-attacking cards, because we have Lady Fencer of the Matter Transmission, which is a multi-attacker for a Link Joker. But in that same breath, we could also place Terrific Coil Dragon for this spot, because both these cards work quite similar and are effectively the same for what they provide to the clan, because they bring a lot of firepower to their clan, as it's a very good solid restander. In Lady Fencer's case, she is a solid restander which doesn't cost you anything, but the issue is that she can only work with Messiah, so she's a bit more restrictive, but thanks to the fact that it's in a Force clan, means that those multi-attacking numbers are a bit more powerful than you would expect them in Aqua Force, for example, which is just an Exo clan. But in Terrific Coil Dragon's case, he has the advantage of being an Aqua Force, which all excels around multi-attacking, but more importantly, it got powerful boss units like Glory Maelstrom, which could really abuse that extra multi-attack and extra 5k power you could generate on a card like that. So both of them could basically be for the number 9 spot, but for the poster girl for this set, I chose Lady Fencer for no particular reason. Now for the number 8 spot, this might surprise some people, because for the number 8 spot, I've chosen Regalia of Fate Norn. A very brand new card that just got released and might not be on everybody's radar, but what this card provides to the archetype, or in this case Genesis, is a lot. It basically allows any potential deck in Genesis get access to a resetting rearguard, which is the Regalia CEO Yggdrasil. But more importantly, Norn works with any Regalia unit, so she works for the entire archetype, which basically means she could resend any Regalia unit. So in Premium, that opens up quite a lot of possibilities with the Regalia Strides or Regalia Great Freeze, and then inherit those Strides abilities. But also in Standard, because Regalias are going to get more support with the upcoming Clan Selection Plus set, so Regalia Fate Norn's power potential might not be at the endpoint where we think it's right now, because she can become even stronger with the upcoming reveals so far. Now for number 7, we go to the other side of the pond for Genesis, as we're going to talk about Oracle Think Tank, because we have Diviner Kuroi Kazuchi. And yes, I didn't put Ear Cup in this spot, because I've said it many times before on the channel, Kuroi Kazuchi is a better Ear Cup, because just like Ear Cup, it basically gives the clan access to an extra drive check whenever they want. But in Ear Cup's case, which basically that's all it provides, Kurakazuchi can utilize it in a more offensive play, because that extra drive checks happens in the main phase. So that extra card you generate, or the extra card you get from the drive check, you can get it in your hand and immediately play it onto the field if it's a powerful grade 2 or grade 1, or maybe a rearguard unit that you can utilize that particular turn. And another upside to Kurakazuchi is that not only does it cost a Soul Blast, which is much easier to pay than just a generic Counter Blast, but it also will always generate power thanks to the 6k power. But on top of it, it also synergizes with the whole generic reveal mechanic of Oracle Think Tank, so it's a much more potent card than Ear Cup could ever be, and we all know how powerful Ear Cup was at the moment it was revealed, so that says a lot. And a card like this could be utilized in a lot of strategies for years to come for Oracle Think Tank, because it's basically a generic get an extra drive check without losing any value, and could potentially synergize with future interactions, and it can be very much a staple card for the upcoming Battle Sister deck if they want to go a more drive check offensive route, especially seen as the new Grade 3 can multi-check the top X amount of cards, so you could actually set up for all those extra drive checks. A lot to think about here. Now, even though Ear Cup didn't get the spot on the list, there's another Gear Chronicle card that took the number 6 spot, because for number 6, we've got my trusted old pal, Smoke Gear Dragon. I don't really have to explain why this card is really powerful, because it speaks for itself. It turns your entire deck into Grade 3 discard fodder for your strike mechanic, be it in premium or standard. So this is cross-format useful, so that already showcases very powerful nature. But on top of it, it's a solid beater that can generate draw power, which costs you soul instead of a counterblast, which is really good. So it's overall a solid plus engine, but it's the most powerful consistency tool that we've got access to. The only issue that you might have with the card is that it's locked behind Chronojet Dragon, but currently you're probably gonna play Chronojet Dragon in most of the cases, and even if you aren't, Chronofang is good enough on its own, and even the Mind Mechanic might not even need a card like this, because they have other solid ways to do their thing. But for Chronojet Dragon and for Gear Chronicle as a whole, this is a very good card. Now we're going to get in the upper half of this video, and for number 5 spot, we've got Unmasked Stealth Rogue Awazu. This might sound of an odd choice, but the reason why I think this is a very powerful card is it's super generic in a clan that's all about multi-copying cards and interaction now with the drop zone with the latest support with Yasue. And the fact that we now have a card which can copy the name of any card in your deck and then send that card to the drop zone is very powerful. I've talked about this many times before in the different Yasue videos or the set review for this support wave for Murakumo, but the fact that you now no longer have to draw the specific card or you need to have it onto the field means a lot for a clan that works around this multi-copy mechanic. Because as long as you have an Awasu, you basically have any card from your deck into your hand or onto the field. And this card was the reason why, even though Shiryuki was at 1, you still had potentially full access to Shiryuki, because you could send it to the drop zone and have this card onto the field, which is a Shiryuki, and then you could potentially superior call the Shiryuki from the drop zone onto the field with the Yasue effect, or you could get the Shiryuki from the drop zone back into your hand with the Rainy Madame. So Awazu, very powerful card now, but could even become better in the future, because as long as I'm going to stick with the whole multi-copy mechanic, a card like this will never lose its purpose, because it's such a solid consistency engine to that generic mechanic. Now for the number 4 spot, we once again have an extra drive enabler, just like we've seen with the one for Oracle Think Tank with Diviner Kurokazuchi, because for the number 4 spot we go to Angel Feathers with Black Mapping Salafil. This is once again a card that allows us to get extra drive check, but unlike most of the cards within Angel Feathers that revolve around this rescue check mechanic, it's generic, so it can be utilized in any deck. But that's not enough reasons to make it up this high on the list, unlike Diviner Kurokazuchi. And that's because of the other aspects of this card. Not only will this always be a solid 19k beater, which makes it a very good beater that can generate high columns, it is also a countercharger in disguise. Where Kurokazuchi just uses resources, Salafil actually generates it while getting that extra drive check, while also becoming a strong beater, with also the potential extra critical you might get of this rescue check. So Salafil is a useful countercharger, extra drive check enabler, and strong beater that's generic, that can be utilized in any potential Angel Feather strategy. And that's reasons enough for me to give this card the number 4 spot, because it's very much likely that this card will be utilized in the long run, depending on which direction we are going to go with Angel Feather. And even with the upcoming Malcolm Malak upgrade card, this card might see play, because it's that solid. Now for the number 3 spot, this is probably not a surprise to a lot, and maybe it is, because maybe some people were expecting it a bit higher, because for the number 3 spot, we've got Drag Wizard Morfessa. Probably don't have to explain why this card is so good and why it's so powerful. It's one of the reasons why Luard is so insane, but to be fair, there are like infinite amount of reasons why Luard was so insane. But for this card in particular, it's a multi-tacker that multi-tacks from the drop zone, which synergizes with your entire engine, while at the same time being a grade 1, so it can be searched out with that same engine, which is insane because that means that this card is super consistent. And the fact that it costs a counterblast synergizes with Charon, which basically allows you to do an entire combo with one counterblast, as you could effectively use your drag driver, counterblast 1, superior call a couple of cards, which one of it is a Charon, then soulblast 1, countercharge it same card. You've also superior called Morfessa, or you call Morfessa to the field, then utilize Morfessa, counterblast 1, superior call the same Charon back to the field, then soulblast 1, countercharge 1 again, and you still at that same counterblast face up, so you effectively cannot be damage denied, which is pretty bonkers if you think about it, while also at the same time generating a lot of force markers, so those multi-attacking cards actually do amount to something. And yes, there's a lot to talk about and a lot to analyze, but that's the case with Morfessa and Luard. They do a lot of different things, which is the reason why they're so powerful. And the only reason why I put it not at number 1 or 2 spot is because of the fact that Morfessa is super restricted to what it is. She needs to be in Luard deck to actually be able to be searched out by the Shadow Paladin grade 1 mechanic. And yes, it can be utilized outside of Luard, but it becomes a lot more restrictive because you need to have an entire field filled with grade 1s, which not every deck can manage to do. So because of that, Morfessa is a solid number 3 spot because it's still an incredibly powerful card, but not as powerful or as useful as the number 2 and number 1 spot, at least in my opinion. Now for the number 2 spot, I want to make up for this card because during the set review, I completely undersold and undervalued this card. Because at the time, I wasn't completely thinking about the implications of what this card could provide and how good it is, and I gave the card unjustifiably a 4-star rating. So with this moment, I'm basically making up to that card by giving it the number 2 spot, and that's not because I gave it a 4-star rating alone, it's because it's completely justified, as this card is an incredibly powerful grade 2. And if you don't remember which card I'm talking about, it's Cool Hank. This card, in my opinion, is one of the most powerful grade 2s released this year. And you might think to yourself, how in God's name is this card so good and why is it much better than all the other cards we already talked in this video? The reason for that is that this card can restand any card for a discard. So that means your opponent cannot damage deny you, and you cannot really run out of resources even if you run out of soul, because you probably have one card in your hand because of drive checking or something else, so you could always restand a unit as long as you have a good target. Discarding might sound bad, but that's actually really good for a clan like Nova Grappler, which is already a glass cannon, so you don't really mind. But I already made this point in previous videos, and I will say it again, you're not effectively discarding a card, you're forcing you and your opponent to discard a card. Because if you utilize its skill and you restand one of your units, you discard a card, but your opponent is probably also forced to discard a card if they want to block the attack. And in some cases, depending on what unit you're restanding and how powerful it is, you could force more than one discard of your opponent. And in that scenario, then you can think to yourself, is it worth it for me to discard one card if it also will force my opponent to discard 3 or 4 cards? In most scenarios, you would say yes to that trade because it's a 1 for 4 or 1 for 3 trade. Even in the worst case outcome, it's a 1 for 1 trade, which might not always be as bad. But there are way more layers to this card because depending on what type of unit you restand, they might have a strong on-attack skill or an on-hit skill. It can also force your opponent to take more damage in the early game. But more importantly, Cool Hank doesn't need to attack the Vanguard in order to activate its skill, so it could attack into a grade 2 interceptor while your opponent has a higher base power or maybe they got defensive trigger, which allows you to gain more value out of all your attacks on the board, which makes Nova Grappler across the board a lot more potent. So for me, Cool Hank, obviously the number 2 spot on this list, no question asked. It's really good. Now for the number 1 spot, we once again have a card that I undersold because just like Cool Hank, I gave this card a lower rating than I actually should give. And to also make up for this card, I'm giving it the number 1 spot, but it's also completely justified because for the number 1 strongest grade 2 released in 2020, we have Pirate Swordsman Columbard. And you might think to yourself, how did you undersold the card? You gave it a 5-star rating, right? Correct. But I should have given this card a 6-star rating, if I'm gonna be very honest, just like I did with Greed Shade, because this is basically a 2020 edition of Greed Shade. Both of them open up the entire clan or deck to endless consistency and options and whatever you want to do, together with Necrobone, which was already a feature in the best grade 1s of this year. Like, I don't know how they do it, but Grand Blue probably get the strongest consistency engine cards ever printed in this game, and it makes the clan very consistent in whatever it tries to do. And the fact that Columbard also enables multi-attacking with Nitros probably tells you enough why this card is so good. Like, you can basically effectively set up an entire a multi-attacking Skull Dragon combo with Nitros, but it opens up way more combos and way more potential plays within the deck. But the fact that it can also mill a specific card from your deck to the drop zone is very important, because it can set up any play you might want to do, or it can set up your drop zone for future potential if you miss certain cards. And this also interacts really nicely with Necrobone, because Necrobone sends itself back into the deck. You can effectively then use Columbard to send that Necrobone back into the drop zone to then utilize its skill the following turn, which also increase on the whole deck building aspect of Necrobone, because every single time you utilize Necrobone, you get +1 card on your total deck count, and with Columbard, you effectively increase the deck count because you can resolve the Necrobone again, which then puts itself back into the deck once again, so it adds on the total additions of your deck count, which is pretty interesting and can work up for the entire course of the game. So Columbard opens up a lot of consistency options for Grand Blue, and it together with Necrobone and Greed Shade and whatever they might do or throw at Grand Blue will make Grand Blue a very scary consistent engine. And these cards total together are mainly the reason why they banned the grade 3 Flanger, because thanks to these cards you could set up a Flanger basically 100% of the time, every single time, with super consistency. Which makes sense, because 100% of all the time, which is 100%, which is consistent, you get the gist of it. And that basically concludes the top 10 strongest grade 2s of 2020. Once again, keep in mind, this is a subjective list of my personal picks and my personal opinion, what I see and justify as the best cards or the best grade 2s of this year. So with that said, I'm curious of what your personal picks are for the best grade 2s released this year for Vanguard. So let me know all your picks and suggestions in the comment section down below. And once again, join me next time when we're going to tackle the top 10 strongest or best grade 3 released this year. As always, this video is brought to you by lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!